Why are women paid less than men? Let's talk about it. It's a basic principle of fairness. Men and women should have the same economic opportunities in life. But all around the world, despite progress and protests and legislation, there is a persistent gap between what men and women are paid. For every dollar a man earns, on average, a woman is paid 54 cents. Based on today's rate of progress, it will take 202 years for this gap to close. And this discrepancy plays out all around the world. But what are behind these numbers? Well, it's both the outright discrimination and a complex web of factors that influence and constrain the options open to women. Parenthood is the moment the wage gap widens, with mothers taking a wage penalty while fathers enjoy a premium. There are many factors behind the wage disparity between men and women. The fact that until recently there were different levels of educational attainment for men and women, and educational attainment is a major determinant of earnings. But during the past 20 years, the world has made tremendous progress on eliminating the educational differences between men and women. So these differences now play a much smaller role in gender earnings differences, particularly among younger workers with a comparable educational attainment levels. So let's talk about other factors that affect the gender gap in earnings. First, women choose different occupations than men. And there are large and persistent differences in the earnings of different occupations. Around the world, occupations like teachers pay less than occupations like engineers. So gender differences in occupational choice affect gender differences in earnings. Why do women and men make different occupational choices? Are there not enough role models for women in higher paying occupations? Are there barriers to female advancement in these occupations? The answer to both questions is yes. Moreover, within high paying occupations, women tend to be more employed at lower levels of the occupational hierarchy. There is a persistent gender gap at the higher ranks of management and leadership within occupations, and this in turn contributes to the gender pay gap within them. There are related gender differences in earnings by industry or sector of economic activity. Around the world, men are more likely to hold jobs at any skill level in manufacturing, a sector that pays relatively high earnings, while women are more likely to hold jobs in educational services, a sector that pays considerably less than manufacturing. Gender differences in employment by occupation and industry are important determinations of gender differences in earnings around the world. So to understand and reduce the gender gap in earnings, it is necessary to understand and reduce the gender differences in employment by occupation and sector. Second, women around the world are also more likely than men to work part-time. And part-time work, even for the same kind of job in the same occupation and sector, has a lower hourly wage with fewer social protections and benefits than comparably full-time work. Women account for about 57% of global part-time work, and the earnings gap between the comparable full-time and part-time work is in the order of 10%. There's also evidence that motherhood and associated gender differences in household care responsibilities are significant factors among the gender pay gap. Third, there's evidence of a wage penalty for motherhood. All else being equal, there is a negative relationship between a woman's wage and the number of children she has. According to OECD data, the motherhood penalty amounts to about 7% of wage reduction per child. There's also some evidence of a fatherhood premium, a positive relationship between the man's wage and the number of children he has. When you compare men and women with comparable education at the beginning of their careers, working full-time in the same occupation and sector, the gender gap in earnings has largely disappeared in many advanced industrial economies. Same education, same work, same wage. 5 to 10 years later, often after the arrival of children, the gender gap in earnings appears. A non-existent wage gap becomes a significant and growing wage gap. Women often choose to move to a part-time employment or to step out of a career promotion pathway in order to have more time for motherhood and childcare when their children are young. If they return to full-time work, they are often forced to accept a lower wage compared to the wage they would have earned had they stayed in their original job. Fourth, there is a significant amount of work associated with running a household and raising children. That work exists. And right now, not just in advanced industrial countries, but around the world, that work is disproportionately done by women, and it's not paid. An important step to closing the gender pay gap is the more equitable sharing of parental responsibilities between men and women. Paid parental leave policies that provide both maternity and paternity leave help achieve this goal, increasing the participation of fathers in childcare and reducing gender stereotyping in childcare and related household responsibilities. When paternity care is non-transferable, men are more likely to take advantage of it, reducing the gender differences in labor force participation rates associated with children. Paternity leave is frequently cited as a very important policy to reduce or eliminate the pay differential resulting from the motherhood penalty and the fatherhood premium. And number 5, discrimination, stereotyping, and implicit biases still play a role. Even taking out the educational effect, the occupational effect, and the sector effect, the part-time work effect, and the motherhood and fatherhood effects, a gender gap in earnings remains. This gap is evident of persistent discrimination, stereotyping, and implicit biases in earnings and promotion opportunities for women. Government policies, legal protections, and changes in business practices, such as regular pay assessments of earnings by gender and pay transparency, are necessary to combat these sources of the gender gap in pay. So what are your thoughts? How much do you deserve to get paid? If you like this video, hit that like button, consider subscribing. I talk about money and everything related to it, so don't miss out. And as always, take care of your money.